Hello, and thank you for joining us today in our study of 1 Samuel. Today we are examining 1 Samuel chapter 9, and in this particular chapter we are introduced to Saul. Remember back in chapter 8 that the children of Israel are clamoring for a king, and God says he will give them what they want. He even tells Samuel to go and to give them warnings about what it is that it will entail for them to have a king. He will do so, and they still want one anyway. And so as you come into chapter 9, you have this introduction of who is going to be the first king, and his name is Saul. Now, chapter 9 actually ends at a very difficult place because the story's only half told, and the other half is going to pick up in chapter 10. But let's see some lessons today and some things that we can learn from what we find here in chapter 9. The first area I want us to look at is found in verses 2 and 3, where there it is stated that Saul is the most handsome person from among the children of Israel, and that from his shoulders upward he was taller than any of the people. So we begin with this description of who Saul is. That Saul is a very handsome man, that he is one who stands quite literally head and shoulders above the people. He looks every bit like the king you would want. He looks like the one you would expect to be the king of a nation. He is big, he is strong, he is handsome, he is all of those qualities from the outward appearance that people are looking for when it comes to what they want to see as their leader. Now, there's going to be many things that are going to happen with Saul. And Saul, at the outset, is going to be very humble, and he's not even necessarily going to want the job, as we're going to see in chapter 10. But at the same time, while Saul is going to look the part, he is also going to very much struggle with the mental side of the work of a king, and most especially being obedient to God under the pressures of being a king. And so one of the things that we have here is this first notation about his appearance, but it also goes back to this whole idea that the outward appearance isn't everything. The outward appearance isn't the only thing that matters. God is going to utilize the man with the perfect outward appearance to be the first king. And yet he's not going to be the perfect first king. And there's going to be many problems that are going to come with Saul. And so the outward appearance doesn't always dictate one's qualifications for anything. And yet, how many times do we see people who will try to say that somebody is the right person for the job, or that they are the right person for a particular position just because of their appearance? Can appearance matter in certain areas? Yes, it can. But the appearance alone is not what is important, and it's not the final determining factor. The second thing that I want us to notice is a discussion that takes place about midway through the chapter in verse 9. Where you're going to have this discussion of the idea of the seer and the prophet, and how you're going to have Samuel being called a seer here. But we know of him as a prophet or as a judge. And there's going to be this statement that's made in verse 9 that says, "Formerly in Israel, when a man went to inquire of God, he spoke thus, 'Come, let us go to the seer. For he who is now called a prophet was formerly called a seer.'" This is simply a title of recognition. This is the way that they were discussed, or the way that they were introduced before the people back in these days. We say it's a prophet. They would say it was a seer. What's the difference? Well, it's two different Hebrew terms. The term for prophet is a Hebrew term that means one who speaks, or one who speaks forth the word of God. The term for seer is from a Hebrew word that means to see or to visualize. The seer was one who saw, and it is believed that this references back to the many times when God would utilize dreams and visions as means of communicating his message to individuals. The seer would be the one who sees. The prophet is the one who speaks. And that's the distinction between the two terms. So in the latter days of the Old Testament times, it just simply became uniformly considered that such an individual was a prophet. Whereas in the days of Samuel, the individual would be described as a seer. Same general idea, same basic concept. Two different areas of emphasis in the names that are being used and the titles being used. So, it's certainly an interesting area of discussion, even if it's not necessarily a major difference or distinction for us to be concerned with. The third area that I want us to look at today is found in verse 17. And that is the fact that God makes the statement that the Lord said to him, or Samuel makes a statement that the Lord said to him, "There he is, the man of whom I spoke to you, this one shall reign over my people." The third thing I want us to consider this morning is the fact that Saul is the one who, or God is the one who chose Saul. Saul certainly did not take this position for himself, having required it or having, by means of his own power and his own authority, obtained it, but rather God is the one who chooses the first king of Israel. He is going to choose a man that at the time that he chooses him is going to be humble. He is going to be one who is going to care about what God says. He is going to be one who is going to be willing to serve God in the early days of his kingdom. But that won't last forever. And that won't always be the way Saul's personality and Saul's manners are going to follow. But here, God chooses Saul. He looks the part of a king. He has a humble temperament at this particular juncture in time. And he is a man that the people will follow. But Saul does not choose this job, nor does Samuel choose Saul. The people do not choose Saul, at least in the initial phases. God does. And so even here, God is exerting his hand over the people of Israel. These are just some of the things that we can pull out of 1 Samuel chapter 9. And there's more that we will be able to pull back into chapter 9 to see as we come into chapter 10 over the next couple of days. And I hope that you'll join us for those studies. But until then, have a great day.